Joey, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation about women leading in crisis and conflict. And obviously you are doing that in a very big way. So I wanted you to give some background to the people who are watching. We've obviously spent the last 15 months globally focused on COVID and the pandemic, which has had tremendous impacts around the world. But so many other things have been happening, especially in what we're talking to you about around Hong Kong and issues around the democracy movement there. So I think it would be helpful if we could start off by you giving people a sense of what's going on in Hong Kong and what's been happening over this last year or two in terms of the democracy movement.
Sure. So thank you so much for having me. And actually, the situation in Hong Kong has been worsening in a very, very rapid way. So in 2019, Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement broke out. And ever since 2019 June, we have seen a lot of Hong Kongers protesting into the streets, protesting against the extradition amendment bill, which is proposed by the Hong Kong government that allows the Hong Kong government to extradite anybody in Hong Kong back to China for a very non-transparent judiciary trial and also the process. And the situation, the protest has been going on, the marches have been going on. We have been seeing so many Hong Kongers protesting every single day. There have been different assemblies and also political gatherings all across the city every single day. But then very soon in July 2020, the Chinese Communist Party decided that they're going to pass the national security law in Hong Kong, which is a legislation that targets basically every single pro-democracy politician, activist, protesters, or every dissident who are willing to stand up against the Chinese Communist Party, who are willing to condemn the Beijing government for its human rights violations. And very soon we have been seeing so many arrests, not only the arrests of pro-democracy politicians, but then also the arrests of different legal professionals, teachers, journalists, and basically every single one who dares to continue to stand up for human rights, democracy, and also freedom in Hong Kong. And also following all the arrests and also the prohibition of the different protests and also marches in Hong Kong, we're also seeing that the government has been taking further steps to further crack down on our freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and also the press freedom. So the most recent incident was that 2 weeks ago, they have decided that they're going to charge several executive members of the Next Digital Media Group, which owns Apple Daily, which is the largest mainstream pro-democracy media in Hong Kong. They decided to arrest their journalists, to arrest their executive managers, and then further than that, they decided to freeze the assets of Apple Daily, and then further leading to a shutdown of Apple Daily. So the situation right now is that the people of Hong Kong have been taking away their freedom, democracy, and also very, very fundamental human rights. And because of the law, because of the further suppression from the Chinese Communist Party, a lot of people in Hong Kong right now are living under fear, and which is a very, very desperate situation.
Well, and I think that brings me obviously to my next question is, what kind of actions are you advocating for to hold the government, the Chinese government accountable for its actions? And what can you inspire and advocate for others to do, given really the very difficult situation, and given that the Chinese government holds so many of the levers and the cards to really crack down in Hong Kong?
I think it is really important at this stage that the international community would be able to step up and to formulate a coordinated policy that includes, for example, economic sanctions, for example, legislations that prevents infiltration from the Chinese Communist Party. Because what we have been seeing in Hong Kong right now is not just about things that have been happening in Hong Kong, but then the story of Hong Kong, I think, is a very clear reflection of the Chinese Communist Party's very aggressive expansion of their ambition to expand their influence to every corner of the globe. So I think it is very important that the international community also extend help to Hong Kong, because they're not just assisting the people of Hong Kong, but then also that is a responsibility for the free world countries to also defend our shared values. So to achieve that goal, we have been mobilizing every individuals, not only Hong Kongers in Hong Kong or Hong Kongers overseas, but then also we have been building alliances with the other allies who are also under oppression of the Chinese Communist Party. So for example, Hong Kongers have been working very closely with our Uyghur, Tibetan, Southern Mongolian, and also Taiwanese brothers and sisters. We have also been working very closely with our allies from the Multi Alliance. We have been organizing different grassroots campaigns, for example, protests, rallies everywhere. And then aside from that, we have also been working together in terms of policy advocacy, where we go talk to the different parliamentarians, we go talk to different government officials to try to raise their awareness towards the very ambitious expansion plans of the Chinese Communist Party. So that has been what we have been doing.
And can you talk a little bit about any successes that you've had, and also what some of your biggest challenges have been, and how you've thought about collectively as a group of people from Hong Kong working on this, what you've thought of to really address those challenges?
I think the largest success, I would say, is the alliances that we have built with our friends from the Uyghur, Tibetan, Southern Mongolia, Taiwan, and also multi-alliance communities, because together with our joint efforts, we were able to become a stronger and also a more unified voice. And that has been proven very effective in terms of policy advocacy. And also when it comes to grassroots organizations, we have been able to organize several very large-scale protests and also rallies worldwide. We have been able to reach the very high-level governmental officials and talk to them, and then to push for some legislations or for some campaigns that will really help defend our shared values. And I would say the largest challenge that we had is, of course, to try to talk to the international community regarding the situations in Hong Kong, because since 2019, we have seen so many protests and also marches going on in Hong Kong. But then we have also seen some of the more brutal or more violent scenes going on in Hong Kong, or places in Myanmar or some other places, for example, in Thailand. And sometimes it can get very challenging to talk to the international community, to our friends from the free world countries, on why have the protesters been using some rather violent or brutal methods to protest. And that became one of the largest challenges that we are facing right now. But I think whenever we got asked, why are your fellow protesters, why are your people protesting rather violently? I think through the process of talking to them, explaining to them, I think it constantly gives us a chance to reflect on our tactics and also to reflect on the methods that we practice. But I think it is also very important that while we always advocate for peaceful, nonviolent solutions to solve our social problems, to solve political issues, but I think it is also very important for us to also note that the different tyrannies across the globe, for example, the Chinese Communist Party itself, have been making it more and more difficult for people to protest in a peaceful way, because for now, people under the Chinese Communist Party's oppression, they cannot vote to elect their next leaders, they cannot protest, they cannot even say anything that goes against the Chinese Communist Party's wills. So I think while we, the international community, or we, the activists, try to explain or try to understand these rather violent or brutal tactics, it is also very important that we reflect on ourselves and think about, we as the people who are privileged enough to live in a free society, are we doing enough to help these people to protest peacefully or in a nonviolent means? And also, we as the people who are able to create some political influence, are we doing enough to encourage our government to provide enough assistance to these people? I mean, not to only protect them, but then also to defend our shared values. So I think all of these have been the challenges that we have been facing, but then it has also become a very good opportunity for us to constantly reflect and also think about other possible ways to continue our fight.
I guess I'd love to know from your perspective, you're obviously a prominent spokesperson for the pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong, and you're a young woman. So I'd love to know how you see being a woman and being a young woman influencing your leadership style and your role in the pro-democracy movement.
I think it has definitely influenced me a lot because as a young activist and yet as a young female activist, it is very often that I got looked down at, and then it is also very often that people will underestimate you, will not invest that much trust in you as they had in the other male activists or male political leaders. So I think all of these biases and all of these very micro discriminations that I have suffered being an activist or actually being a female in a society, I think all of these experience allowed me to reflect on myself and also to be under and also to allow myself to be in others' shoes, to be a more caring person that would really understand how does it feel like to be looked down at, and also how does it feel like to be discriminated against simply because of your gender or simply because of your age. And I think having that experience when I am leading or organizing activities or campaigns, I would always try my best to make sure that every coworker of mine, every teammate of mine would be able to work under an environment where they receive equal opportunities, where they receive equal expectations, and no one would ever be looked down or underestimated simply because of their gender or their age or any other reasons, for example, like their race or background. And I think that has definitely influenced me a lot.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective that it has given you insight into how other people live their lives. And I think that happens with a lot of, prominent sort of leaders, that they take from their own experience and it helps them relate to other people in a very, very effective way. But do you see your responses different than a man's would be? Hard to say, you're not a man, obviously, but in your observation, do you see being a woman in leadership having a different style than a man in leadership in the pro-democracy movement?
I think I would say our responses differs, but then the reason is not simply because of our gender, but then also because of a lot of the other reasons. But then as a female leader or a female activist myself, when I respond to crisis, when I respond to different incidents happening in Hong Kong or outside of Hong Kong, I would always pay extra efforts into understanding the sufferings and also the hardships of the female victims of the different crises and also of the different incidents, because I understand that very often when we focus on political crisis happening all across the globe, we sometimes have neglected the feelings and also the personal experiences of all these victims, and especially for female. So as a female activist who understand how does it feel like to be neglected or ignored, I think that influenced me a lot, and that allows me to be extra careful and also to pay extra attention when it comes to response to crisis or incidents across the globe.
I think that's a challenge, right? Because you have so many disparate groups of people who are engaged in trying to, express their opposition, and I think it's always a challenge to kind of keep that focus on, nonviolence and one sort of message when you do have a lot of disparate people, and it is really, I think it is a big challenge. So I know that that's something that you've been asked a lot about and that you've focused on. But that actually kind of gets me into my next question, which I think is so interesting. The fact that there are so many different, groups of people, civil society, women's groups, other key actors in Hong Kong, both in Hong Kong and outside Hong Kong, who have been working on this pro-democracy movement. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what the role of, those various sectors has been, including the private sector, and then also the issue of, those outside Hong Kong and those inside Hong Kong. How have those groups and those people really mobilized together to address the issues that Hong Kong is facing?
I mean, throughout Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement, we have been seeing a lot of very, very outstanding, very courageous female leaders taking up roles, for example, as the political leaders or, for example, as activists. They have been doing a very, very great job pushing forward the democratic development in Hong Kong. They have been doing a very outstanding job in terms of voicing out for the more underprivileged communities in Hong Kong, and also to be able to stand up for the people in Hong Kong in our fight for freedom and democracy. And aside from all these political figures, we have also been seeing a lot of other very outstanding female leaders in Hong Kong who might not be constantly under the spotlight, but have been working tirelessly behind the scenes. So for example, in Hong Kong's movement, we have been seeing a lot of mothers, we have been seeing a lot of female leaders who are, for example, business owners, for example, are social workers. They have been volunteering to take care of the younger protesters in Hong Kong who got into conflicts with their family members and got kicked out from their own homes or from their own schools. A lot of female leaders in Hong Kong have been doing a very great job in terms of organizing different resources to take care of these younger protesters. They have been a very, very solid support to the pro-democracy fighters in Hong Kong who have been fighting on the front lines, who have been standing under the spotlight. We have seen a lot of these female and women standing behind the scenes doing a very great job in support of us. And in the private sector, we're also seeing a lot of business women willing to provide their space as a shelter for the protesters in Hong Kong. They have been donating money to support the pro-democracy activisms and also efforts in Hong Kong. And they have also been trying their best to make use of their space, make use of their business as a tool, as a channel to sustain the momentum that we have built since 2019. And all of these very great work done by the female leaders in Hong Kong, done by the Hong Kong female leaders, those are not only happening in Hong Kong, but then also overseas. I mean, outside of Hong Kong, we are also seeing a lot of people, not only Hong Kongers, but then also the other female leaders across the globe who have been defending the rights and also freedoms for the people of Hong Kong, and also the shared value that we all share as people who live in a free society. And they have been doing a very outstanding job.
My last question for you, because I know you have a lot on your plate, is really to just talk a little bit about what you see the long-term impact of the pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong, not only on Hong Kong, but really on the region and globally, just so that people who are listening have a sense of where you see it going in the next period of time.
I would say the experience of Hong Kong, the things that have been happening in Hong Kong, can be seen as a canary in the coal mine, because what has been happening in Hong Kong is not just about the autonomy of Hong Kong. It's not just about the deterioration of freedom and democracy in Hong Kong, but then it is again a very clear reflection of the Chinese Communist Party's ambition and also aggression. They have been trying to also expand their influence to every corner of the globe, including Hong Kong, including Asian countries, Asian regions, and also the Western societies. So I think what has been happening in Hong Kong is going to be something that could be happening in any of our countries very, very soon. And I think that is a very important lesson for not only Hong Kongers, but then also for the countries in the free world, and also for every individual who are living in the free society. We have to be aware of Chinese Communist Party's very aggressive expansion. We have to be aware of the fact that Beijing has been trying to violate human rights, freedom, and democracy, and they have been trying to destroy our international rule-based order and rebuild another set of international rule-based order based on their standards, which is with a disregard to human rights and democracy. And I think it is very important that we, the people of Hong Kong, would be able to make use of our first-hand experiences of being oppressed by the Chinese Party to alert the world, and then to also raise awareness to make the people in a free society realize the danger, how dangerous the Chinese Party can be, and also how fragile our freedom and democracy and also our core values could be, and then to reflect and also to make an effort to step up, to uphold and also to defend all these shared values.
Well, I really want to thank you for your leadership in Hong Kong, your leadership on these issues globally. I want to really appreciate you as a leader and thank you for being part of this series.
Thank you so much.